Welcome to the Let's Get Entrepreneurial podcast, your go-to resource for navigating the world of entrepreneurship. In today's episode, we dive into the art and strategy of negotiation, an essential tool every entrepreneur should master. Whether you're securing investments, forming partnerships, or navigating contracts, effective negotiation can be the linchpin to your venture success. Join us as we unpack the intricacies of negotiation and equip you with tactics to turn discussions into win-win outcomes.
The Let's Get Entrepreneurial podcast is your ultimate launchpad for igniting ideas and skyrocketing your entrepreneurial dreams. Tune in, buckle up, and let's unleash the entrepreneurial spirit within. Your two hosts will be Professor Gary Palin and serial entrepreneur Ryan Budden.
Hello, Ryan. How are you doing today?
I'm doing brilliantly. What about you, Professor Palin?
Oh, busy as always.
That's good. Keeps the energy going.
Definitely. Ryan, today I would like to talk about what I believe is an indispensable skill in entrepreneurship, and that's negotiation.
Absolutely.
It really is the linchpin of multiple business dealings.
A lot of business has an element of negotiation. People sometimes demonize negotiation and view it in these really particular scenarios, but you negotiate with yourself, with your coworkers, and with vendors and things like that.
I'm sure most people know what negotiation is, but if they're not familiar with it, it's basically reaching a mutually beneficial agreement between parties that have different interests or perspectives. I like to look at negotiation mindsets from two perspectives, and they're both very different. Either someone has a win-win perspective or the second is a win-lose perspective. The win-win is more collaborative negotiation, where both parties negotiate to come away with a positive outcome. Where a win-lose, it's a competitive negotiation. The parties are perceiving it as a zero-sum game. In other words, one party gains is the other party's loss.
Yeah, the I have to win scenario of negotiations.
I lean very, very much to the win-win scenario because in my perspective, win-lose is a short-term gain, where win-win is a long-term gain.
Right. And oftentimes there is a way to reach a win-win where both parties truly think they're coming out with a good deal.
Basically, you're looking at trying to expand the proverbial pie, if you will, and ensure mutual benefits. Where on the win-lose, the negotiation is aimed at maximizing your own share at the expense of others, taking the biggest piece of the pie. If I negotiate with someone and I win and they win, the next time we have an opportunity to work together, they want to because they've won. Whereas in a win-lose, if I've crushed them, they will probably not want to negotiate or do any business dealings with me in the future. So you're losing future opportunities to seize opportunities and all types of issues associated with business.
It's interesting you bring up the pieces of the pie analogy because I feel like that's a common one associated with negotiation. Where I tend to focus, is there a different pie entirely that's important to one of the participants? So instead of divvying up this pie in the middle, do they really care about something else that we can lump in, throw in that I don't care about? So a pie that's forgotten in the oven, if you will.
Basically, what you're saying, the way I'm viewing this is you want to understand each party's interest, and they are not always the same interest.
Yeah, oftentimes I've found that they're not.
What are the objectives? And you're looking to find a creative solution to satisfy both sides with a win-win. Where a win-lose, it's really a battle of wills.
It really is. It's who has the upper hand. Typically, that gets not nice for everybody involved in the situation.
That adversarial interaction is typically, for me at least, is not fun. Some people, I guess, thrive on it. I prefer not to deal in that type of issue because you become guarded in your communication. There's mistrust associated with a win-lose. Where it's the opposite with a win-win, there's open communication, and it's a different approach to doing business deals.
We've all been involved in some sort of a negotiation where the other person has that I must win strategy. It's off-putting from the beginning because there always comes a situation in which you feel like they're just trying to prove a point. It doesn't really feel like this is furthering the end result whatsoever.
It's akin to the example I think of is like wrestling with a pig in a pigsty. You get down in the pigsty in the mud wrestling with the pig. You both get very muddy, but the problem is the pig enjoys it.
That's funny.
That's my visualization of a win-lose negotiation.
There we go. I like it. I think that one's going to stick with me.
Ryan, before we continue discussing today's topic, we have an exciting announcement. It's finally here.
That's right. The moment you've been waiting for, the official launch of the Janus Entrepreneurial Assessment, a revolutionary tool designed to unlock your true entrepreneurial potential.
We're thrilled to invite our podcast audience to be part of this groundbreaking launch. Imagine gaining unprecedented insights into your unique strengths, pinpointing areas for growth, and charting a roadmap to entrepreneurial success.
Join us at ProfSpirit.com, where you'll embark on a transformative journey of self-discovery and empowerment. And here's the best part. As a special introductory offer exclusively for listeners of the Let's Get Entrepreneurial podcast, the Janus Entrepreneurial Assessment is available at a deep discount for just $1.99 through the entire month of November of this year when you use the code SUCCESS at checkout.
That's a significant savings from the standard cost of $49.99. You can find the link and code in the podcast episode description to take advantage of this exclusive offer. Be among the first to discover what the future holds for your entrepreneurial journey. As you mentioned, you negotiated virtually everything you're doing in not just entrepreneurship, but our focus is entrepreneurship. People typically think of fundraising or financing, which it's a negotiation component. But your negotiation with your employees, hiring and compensation, for example. Your sales and client contracts are negotiation. You negotiate with your suppliers. Even if you have a physical location, you're negotiating for office space.
A big one that's sort of existential that people miss is you negotiate with yourself all the time. You're going to set boundaries for what your expectations are. There is a win-win scenario. People choose to drive themselves. This mental game scenario that you can run through is prevalent everywhere.
We were just dealing with this the past couple of days. We were discussing before we started this podcast is we're working on some very detailed component of the code for the Janus assessment, and it's drudgery. Neither of us enjoys it, but we negotiated with ourselves and say, we've got to do this. And we blocked hours away and forced ourselves to do that. That was a negotiation with ourselves.
It's exactly right. Undesired task that needs to get done.
Yes, and thank God it's done. Key principles of successful negotiation are viewed from several areas, but one is before I negotiate, I like to prepare and do research. I want to understand what my position is and what the other party's needs are and what the market is. Before I go into any negotiation, I'm doing research and I'm preparing.
Understanding where they're coming from, what they're desiring, what you can afford to lose, where the hard stops are, knowing the game before you're playing it is super important.
And then with that, I want to understand what my clear objectives are before I enter a negotiation.
And being able to eloquently tell the person what your objectives are, I feel like helps as well.
That flows into the role of communication, building rapport and trust. With that, not only to be able to explain what your objectives are, but to listen actively to what the objectives are of the party you're negotiating with.
That's absolutely key. I've gotten lucky where I've been involved in many negotiations that have been very high stakes, but not at my expense. So I've been a participant in these, and you see so often when the emotions are high and people's adrenaline is pumping that they shut down on their listening. And each party is pretty clearly telling them the outcome that they want, and they're both missing it. Sometimes it takes a third party or a very relaxed participant to stop and actively listen, like you just said.
Very often people interject their emotions in the negotiations where, as you're saying, a third party can take those emotions away and look at it objectively. And also while in negotiation, I have the mentality if I have to be flexible and adaptable. I have to be willing to adjust my stance without compromising my core interest.
Right. And the core interest is the key to that, understanding what your core interest is so that you have that hard stop and you understand what you can be flexible on. In the negotiation part of it, when you're really talking to the person, you know where those lines are and you're not stumbling backwards trying to figure out that on the fly.
You don't want to wing this. At times when you're negotiating, there are uncertainties that come about. That's where the preparation and understanding what your objectives are helps keep you focused. And you can identify mutual concessions that you can make.
That's exactly right.
Another area that I look into or I'm aware of before I start negotiation, I want to understand leverage. recognizing the sources of power and influence in the negotiation, because very often both parties don't have equal power. One has a stronger position than the other for various reasons. I've been on both sides of that, and you do want to understand that. And it helps you understand how much can you push for specific areas or concessions, or can I walk away and should I walk away?
So right as you started saying that, your smile got very big. I think this might be the fun part of the negotiation for you.
Actually, when I'm in the position of power, it's not as much fun as when I'm not. When someone has more power, and that allows for more creativity in the negotiation where you can come up with a win-win scenario.
Sure. It is important, though, who has the power and who's going to need to make concessions. It's not as easy as people think. TV shows and movies, negotiations are often depicted where one person has all of the power. In my experience in real life, the power is typically pretty evenly matched. It's just offset. So someone has more of an influence in a certain aspect, whereas the other person might have equal as much influence, just in a slightly different aspect.
You have to be careful. If you do have the dominance of power, it would be easier to move into a win-lose perspective if you have more power and you want to exercise it and use it like a sledgehammer. There's an old saying, when you're moving up the corporate ladder, be careful of who you step on the way up, because on the way down, those people will remember you.
Yeah, it's true.
You have to be very careful because you don't know what's going to be happening in 10, 20 years. And that person that you're really hitting with a sledgehammer might turn around to be your boss in 10 years.
Right.
How about developing negotiation skills? Do you have any thoughts on how they can develop negotiation skills?
Practice makes perfect. I think in most things, that's the key. Get out there and get in scenarios in which you're negotiating, even if it's very small things. The process, and I like the way you said it, of thinking creatively about the outcome is super beneficial. Another big one is mentorship. Having mentors that have been through similar negotiations or have been through negotiations, period, that you haven't been a part of can be huge. Listening and participating in the way that they're creative and come to win-win scenarios can then influence the way you think about it when it's your turn to actually be a member of that negotiation.
Yeah, that's where my mind was going also, is I would actively create a negotiation scenario and practice it. And I would suggest recording yourself doing this. You can watch how you're taking about this. And with your mentors, you can have them review and give you comments also. It is a skill you can practice and learn.
Yeah. That, and back to one of the first things we said, that everything is a negotiation. Realizing that the skills you pick up when you're buying a family home and looking at a garage sale have commonalities. Using the skills in each one of those scenarios, even though they're wildly different and represent wildly different aspects and levels of importance in your life, they do have commonalities that you can pull out.
Any final thoughts before we conclude on negotiation?
Have fun with it. This can be an enjoyable outcome for everybody involved. Don't hunker down and go in with the mentality that I win or they win.
Definitely. And I would suggest practice and refining negotiation skills and avoid wrestling with a pig.
There we go. Well, let's get entrepreneurial.
Let's get entrepreneurial.
As we wrap up another episode of the Let's Get Entrepreneurial podcast, we extend our gratitude for your presence and attention. Your dedication to the entrepreneurial spirit fuels our passion for creating this podcast. Check out ProfSpirit.com to discover resources and courses designed specifically for innovators like you. Stay on the cutting edge by following us on Spotify, Apple Podcast, YouTube, and other platforms as it is released. Until then, keep the entrepreneurial flame burning.